G'day fans and welcome to another exciting episode of DNA Reviews. I've been talking about the old Star Trek Picard. I'll tell you what, I was so excited about this particular episode. I actually almost forgot to press the button to go live to broadcast tonight. So we could have been just sitting here going, well, we're just twiddling thumbs and nothing's happening because I haven't pressed the button yet. But I'll tell you what, one person's button I love pressing is Mr. Aron. How you going, tonight, Mr. Aron?
Good. Like, just so everybody knows, we were pushing buttons up until 30 seconds ago because my internet wasn't working properly. So we apologize for any technical difficulties leading into this show.
Very good stuff. Now, hopefully some people will be joining us as we go along because we've got a bit of an interesting discussion tonight because we're talking about good old Star Trek Picard, the Season 2 overview. Now, we haven't gone through the usual process of doing it one episode at a time. We're just going to do the whole lot in one shebang. So it's the episode or the series finished only like a few days ago, which is particularly groovy. And as always, we will be discussing spoilers. So if you haven't seen the show or you don't want to be spoiled, then the most important thing, of course, is to just be aware that we are going to be discussing those. Very, very quickly, Mr. Aron, your thoughts on the good old Pilchard Season 2. What do you reckon?
Well, Captain Picard is one of my favourite Star Trek characters. Season 1, I was a little bit disappointed by, and I've got to say I was a little bit disappointed by this as well. What were your thoughts?
Well, it's very interesting you should mention that because as I've sort of worked out as we've gone along, when it comes to a Star Trek series, and it is a Star Trek series, we're going to focus on that for this particular discussion, it needs to focus on three key areas, whereas most shows only need to do two. So the first one is all about entertainment. Obviously, you've got to be entertained. You've got to go, wow, this is great. I'm enjoying it. I'm having a lot of fun. It's all great and wonderful. Clearly, that's a very important thing. The next thing, of course, is the story. The story's kind of got to work. So you got to make sure you're dialed into it and you go, oh, this is absolutely fantastic. And, of course, you are competing against the old first season. But the hard one, and this is what's caught a few people out already, is the continuity. And, of course, Star Trek's continuity is so big and complicated that if you do end up screwing up your own continuity, as in conflicting with previous iterations of Star Trek series, whether they're set before Picard or after Picard, people do pick up on that. And even though as writers they may say, oh, no, we can push some of that to the side, it really doesn't matter. Sometimes it does, and it will actually annoy fans considering this is for the fans. Having said that, some of the continuity, some of the gags were quite good. So that was something I thought for myself, I'm not going to focus too much on it. I don't want to sit there nitpicking, oh, they did this in this episode, oh, they did this in this episode. But it'll be very interesting to see how we sort of interpret all of that. What do you reckon, Mr. Aron?
Well, it's interesting because you talk about the continuity, and I think a good story, you can bend the continuity because if a story is good and it contradicts something that was said in one episode 40 years ago, fair enough, it's not too important. But when the story starts contradicting its own season and things like that, that's when I kind of have a problem with stuff, and that's when I started thinking the wheels fell off this. I loved the start of the series. I thought the first 4 episodes were some of the strongest Star Trek that had been done in years, to the point where when the show ended, I was actively going, oh, what happens next? Like looking forward to the next episode. So I thought they set it up really, really well. I just didn't think the payoff lived up to the setup.
Yeah, it's interesting because a few people have picked up on that, saying that the whole thing could have been condensed down and been a bit shorter, and there's a lot going on at the same time. So obviously you had the Q story, you had the whole thing with the timeline thing, the Europa mission, all the personal interpersonal issues that were going on. Picard sort of flashed back into when he was a kid and all the rest of it. And there's a whole lot all going on at the same time, and you do think that in some cases some story arcs kind of got shoved aside for other story arcs. So yeah, it was an interesting one to say, to sort of be aware of, but it wasn't all bad depending on your perspective. So
here's the thing that kind of annoyed me. It was a complex time bending story, and I do think they really tried to wrap it up, that we would have one whole episode that concentrates on an FBI agent that goes absolutely nowhere. And they could have just not done that episode and had more with maybe Renee, his ancestor, who is meant to be the most important person in the timeline, but disappears for 3 episodes and you don't see what she's up to.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I'm going to be flicking. I've got all these pictures I've saved and they're all out of order, so I'm going to be just like going all over the place looking for the damn things. So you're talking about good old Renee. So we'll kick off there. So this is obviously Picard's sort of grandniece, whatever, going way back in the distant past. The funny thing I found with this is the episode, well, the series is set in 2024 when they go back in time. And of course, Renee is going to be going on the Europa mission. Now, of course, in our real 2024, no one's going anywhere in 2 years' time, right? We haven't even gone to like the ISS is the best we can get. We can't even get to the damn moon. So I don't know why they would have set this in 2024 thinking, oh, yeah, we'll be going to Europa, a moon of Jupiter, in a couple of years' time.
I guess this is an alternate Star Trek timeline because we didn't have the eugenics wars and we're not looking like World War III and all that kind of thing.
See, I disagree with that because I work on the view that when they go back into current contemporary society, it is our contemporary society. So in Star Trek 4, which obviously this series really emulated, where they go back in time to 1986, that was our 1986. So if you said, oh, it's 2024, but it's an alternative version of 2024, you could change all these things that we actually don't have right now and go, it's an alternative reality. But they've based all of it pretty much based on what I can see in what we have right now, and no one's flying to Europa in 2 years' time. So
I absolutely agree with you. When they come back, it should be in our 2024, but it obviously wasn't, as you're pointing out. So that's what I have an issue with.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, they're going to Europa in 2 years from now, which is like a completely way off you could almost argue the show could have been set in 2034 rather than in 2 years' time. Be that as it may, let's put that aside for one moment. The thing that I found funny is that with Renee's mission, right, everything hinges on what she does. So she flies off to Europa as part of the mission, goes to IO, finds life on IO, brings it back, and everybody goes, oh my God, it is the greatest cure of everything. It fixes climate change, it fixes the environment. Obviously, it doesn't fix radioactive particles because World War III is still scheduled to occur because we know all that because of First Contact. So it's an interesting one where it's looked upon as being, oh, this is a really positive thing. It's great. It's wonderful. She's flown off. Yay, team. No problems there. But as part of that whole continuity, we still know that even though the eugenics wars didn't occur in real life, they're going to occur because Sung is now looking at the Khan project, which I actually thought was a pretty good little gag, actually. So, I reckon that was kind of groovy. So maybe it's just been pushed forward a little bit. And, of course, World War III still has to occur, which then leads us to, was it 100 years of complete unhappiness before First Contact occurs.
I did think Renee's mission was interesting. It was almost like she was going to get there and there was going to be the Wild Stallions concert that has the song that unites the universe and saves everything and fixes all the timelines. It's one of those things they use as a trope in science fiction, the one discovery that, causes the perfect future for everyone. And when we've already seen Next Generation is the perfect future, but in Picard, that kinds to be falling apart again, where, again, you've got wars and you've got infighting in Starfleet, you've got drugs and all this stuff with Seven being a ranger and raiders and things like that. So I sometimes wonder if it's better just to think maybe Picard is an alternate timeline and not exactly the same Jean-Luc Picard that we know from Next Generation.
Yeah, see, it doesn't work for me because, and I'm going to get to some comments in a second, because you've got the prime timeline and you've got the Kelvin timeline, and the prime timeline, there's only one, right? Everything's meant to mix in with itself. And the moment you start saying, oh, it's a different timeline, well, it makes no sense because then you can just write off everything that you've seen or done. So you could argue, if you're using your analogy, saying, well, in the Next Generation timeline, Picard dies, straight after the end of all good things, and what kind of Nemesis, I think, or whatever, the last iteration, he dies because in that timeline, that's what happens. But in the Picard series, clearly he's still alive. It gets very convoluted. I think you've got to work on the view there's just the one. But I do see where you're coming from. It's the ultimate get out of jail free card. Thomas has made a comment saying it was oblivious to me that doing a Picard series that Q would be inclusive. Yeah, it's very interesting because when Q was first announced as being in the show, fans went completely nuts, right? Oh my God, Q's coming back, and it's the same actor, John Delancey, and all the rest of it. And that's all particularly groovy. The question, of course, is, well, what's the point of it? Why is he there? And I thought it was interesting because when he appears, he still has the same arrogant attitude towards Picard that he's always had, right?
Yeah.
But as it turns out at the end of the show, he actually likes Picard, right? He's actually his favorite. I thought, he's got a funny way of showing it.
Well,
what do you reckon?
He had, in all of Q's episodes, he has been more of a trickster than sort of someone who's out to cause harm, and he has always been someone who has been guiding Picard. The issue I had with Q was story driven again, in that he did this thing that splits the timeline Q from the future goes back to the past, but still looks old. And I'm like, well, isn't Q in the past meant to be younger? But that doesn't matter. In the past, he's going, I didn't know Picard would go back to the past. I didn't know all this would happen. Yes, he did. He was the one who caused it all. There was a lot of stuff that the characters did that didn't seem motivated or to make sense. It was like, okay, he's teaching Picard a lesson again, because he's done that quite a few times in different episodes, tapestry and all good things. But this one, it seemed a bit too convoluted. Why was he so actively trying to get Noonian Sung to ruin everything to cause that future, when he's just trying to get Picard to, be healed and be loved kind of thing? It was really, it didn't seem that Q motivations were correct through the episode. They changed from episode to episode.
Yeah, there was definitely a question you could scratch your head over, going, well, why was the Renee mission so important? And of course, if you wanted to, you do a Terminator and you just kill Renee before she flies, rather than not have her fly the ship and end up with the Confederation timeline that you want. I know if you analyze it too much, it will do your head in. Now, there are a couple of comments here that Thomas has said his Q is the best opinion, unique of the characters and all the rest of it. But of course, in the TV series, he's not just himself. He's got a whole Q continuum to deal with. And of course, it was brought up by some people who said, well, hang on, if Q is dying, is that the entire continuum or just him? Because he does have a wife, he does have a kid, or he had an ex-wife. And I don't know. Don't even think about it too much. It'll make your ears bleed. And I don't know who this is, but this is System Failure 404. Said the system season is summed up with a line from 7 to 9. They aren't alive anymore. They're Borg now. Well, I guess you could argue that some of the writers of this series are a bit like that, which is unfortunate, because I tried to switch my brain off and just go, you know what, I'm just going to take it at face value and not analyze it too much. But when I was reading a lot of the comments from a lot of the fans later on, they were finding gaps everywhere. And I go, yeah, I hear it. I get it. And I understand that it can bring the enjoyment of a show down. So with that, I like this from Colin, with friends like Q, who needs enemies? And it was all summed up in the last minute where, Q's about to cark it. And he says, I'm going to return you back to where you came from and you've learned your lesson and all this sort of bullshit. And you go, could have been done a lot easier. Having said that, though, I did like the fact that you do see Q in his original form, and they do find a way to say, well, okay, we're going to make you older now. So there was some really good Easter eggs or little nods to other Star Trek series. I've got to give them credit for that. So
I've got to say as well, the continuity when it was done for comedy was actually done really well. Like the punk on the bus and naming Star Trek episodes in the dialogue, which I thought was quite cool. When the continuity was done, and this is big spoilers, Gary Seven's unit from the original series was controlled by the Traveller that Wesley's in charge of, and Wesley comes back and recruits people for the Traveller, and the Watchers are controlled by the Travellers. That kind of was a step too far for me. I thought that was that goes from nice continuity to fan wank, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a good description, actually. And you are right. The punk on the bus thing, it was just a hark back to Star Trek 4. I think every Star Trek fan in the universe knows that, but still, it was a nice little gag. And, of course, it was the same guy as well, good old Kirk Thatcher. I agree with you, that sequence where Wesley appeared, and I just thought straight away, because he looks exactly like he does in The Big Bang Theory. And if you remember how Sheldon used to call him, Weech! First thing I thought of. And I don't know, it just seemed to make no sense whatsoever as to why Corey would now become part of the traveling thing. I just didn't get that. That, to me, I agree with you. Fan wank is probably the answer to that one. So it should, as he said, you got two options: is like the blue pill and the red pill. Take one and just live a normal, happy life. Take the other one, you see how the Father Rabbit Hole goes. I thought she would have just said, no, I'll just keep going as I am. I'm a happy camper now. So I just didn't get that at all. That did not seem necessary. And unfortunately, I just kept thinking it was Will Wheaton rather than Wesley Crusher. So
that's unfortunately the thing when they bring people back like that. And it really was a cameo. The story didn't need it. I think they tried to over-egg the pudding by putting too much in. I would have set up the story with the first episode, the alternate universe, and then going back in time. I wouldn't have introduced Noonian Song. I wouldn't have introduced his daughter. I'd have concentrated on just doing the mission. And I tell you, for people going back in time and trying to stay off the radar and not doing anything to upset the timelines, boy, would they fail. They'd get an F for stealing cars and punching people and killing people and doing all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's a bit that was really stretching the friendship. So they steal a police car and like outside the police station, and the cops aren't even aware of it. And I thought that was pretty easy to do, and they sort of doing their big chase. And I thought it was funny that one of the hardest things, and it's difficult for us as the audience in this modern day and age, right? The hardest things to demonstrate is when you've got people from the future who come back 5 years, 100 years in the past, and they interact with our world today like it's natural. But the thing is, it's not natural. Driving cars for them is not natural, right? Being on roads, being on the ground, doing this, doing that, using money, finance as well. It is not. It's really hard work. And one of the things that really caught me out is when Raffi says, "Watch out for the truck," and I thought, how does she know it's called a truck? Right. So if you work on the view that if you transported ourselves back 500 years in the past, even though you'd be able to relate to, oh, that's a ship and that's a person, there's a lot of things that we would not be able to sort of comprehend because this is how this world operates now. So, but for us as the audience, they have to do that. They have to interact with it. Sure, there's a little bit of a joke there regarding the money and all the rest of it. But yeah, it does get a little bit, okay, you're making fun of today's society just because you guys are from the future. So, yeah, it was a bit iffy. But anyway, not to worry.
Well, the main threat and the main villain in this was the Borg Queen, and I think the story as a piece of drama hinged on how serious a threat she was and what she could do in the past. And again, for me, it wasn't set up so well because the Borg Queen helped them to get back to the past because she didn't want to end up in the future where the Borg were gone and she was going to be assassinated and killed next. And then as soon as she gets back in the past, the first thing she starts to do is trying to muck everything up and fight against what they're trying to do, which I kind of thought was a bit mind-bending and maybe not too realistic. The other thing,
sorry, go on.
Her and Girardi are talking and find out, what's happening and what's going on. You find out the whole Borg stuff happened because the Borg needed a hug and were lonely.
Yeah, I hear you. Rico said an alternative universe had so much more potential. That's the Confederation universe than the going to the past and messing around with 2024. It is a bit of a hard one to swallow. I get the idea of the butterfly effect that Renee doesn't get to go to Europa, doesn't find the life form on Io, and therefore the Confederation comes into being. That kind of doesn't make any sense because the World War III will still occur. We've seen in First Contact specifically how the Earth looks, right? And it doesn't look that way because Renee found a life form on Io a couple of hundred years prior to that. It all occurs when the Vulcans land, right? So it's stringing a bit of a long bow to say, oh, yes, her finding life on Io, bringing it back to Earth, puts everything on a good path. So, that was a bit of a tough one. And I do agree, the idea of the Confederation, which I must say, if I find my picture here, straight off the top of the head, you can say, is this another version of the Terran Empire from the Mirror Universe? It certainly seemed that way. And I was very intrigued to see where all this was going.
There was some great episodes of Enterprise, actually, where they even changed the opening title sequence and there was the Confederation instead of the Federation in that as well. The alternate universes and the mirror universes are good in Star Trek if they're done well. And I did think there was a lot of potential in this one.
Yes. So Rico's mentioned, but the new Trek society isn't even better than the past. Yeah. They still have racist xenophobes. Yeah, don't help Romulans. You're right. Yeah, and that's a very good point because you've got effectively what you had the Roddenberry vision, which was like complete utopia for the entire universe. And then once Roddenberry was gone and all the other guys, the Rick Bermans of the world came in, they said, no, we're going to darken it up a little bit muddy, make it a bit muddy. And you can't, and I agree with them because ultimately you can't change human perspectives that much. Some people, most people, definitely, but not all of them. And of course, it makes a good conflict if you've got a dude who's a bastard towards other races. I mean, that's where the entertainment factor comes into it. Even if you think, well, that shouldn't be that way, but that's how people are, and you can't change their spots over hundreds of years. So you are right. So even though the Federation and Starfleet are meant to be looked upon as being absolutely fantastic, there is dark parts of them as well. So I definitely agree with that. With the Confederation version, though, what I thought was interesting is the whole human first, aliens come second scenario. And I thought that could actually work. It's like taking what you have today, the racist side of today, with white people and African Americans or whatever, and just taking it into an international, intergalactic mindset, just like you had with the show. Oh, I've lost my good old Aaron. I'll see if he comes back. So I'll just put myself into full screen for the moment. and it's like Alienation, the TV series, where okay, we're going to direct all that xenophobic sort of mindset towards other beings, and so very, very interesting to see how that all how that works. And that, you're right, is the appeal of DS9 as well. Mr. Aron, you're back again to join us, old son.
Sorry, I'm still having difficulties here. The other thing you were talking about, I guess, First Contact. Why was the need to redo First Contact when there's now Vulcans on Earth? Like, that was a bit weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, that I was going to ask not you personally, but the Trek nerds out there. I was under the impression, and it gave the impression, that the very first time the Vulcans ever came to Earth, ever, was actually in First Contact. And yet in the FBI dude's past, he came across them in the bushland, right? Now, you have to work on the view that if these guys are here in actually, that was in 2024. I realized I got the wrong thing. That was probably not 1960 something. Then chances are they've been here before. And I thought, hang on, that is a direct conflict with established continuity, because if the Vulcans have been here already, when First Contact occurs, they'll be going, yeah, we've been watching you guys for hundreds of years. That really puts a massive spin on everything. And I did not agree with that concept there. I mean, it worked for the story. I get it. I mean, of course, that dude, he's just having his own Fox Mulder moment, right? He's just his own version of Fox Mulder, even has the basement in the FBI office and all the rest of it. So, that didn't cut the mustard. If anything, it would have worked better had he met an aggressive alien species rather than a passive one that fit like something we've never seen before. And he says there are aliens out there and they're all assholes to me. That would work. But the fact that he's Vulcans, I really questioned that. I thought that was a bit of a balls up.
Yeah. Have like the Jem'Hadar saying that the Earth is like too primitive to bother about or something like that.
Yeah, exactly right. And you are right. Yeah, in life you can't have the bad. And the reality is that's how you create entertainment. You create entertainment by conflict. If everybody's one big happy family, suddenly it's boring. So that's where the Big Brother TV series comes from. So yes.
Yeah. I guess the other big continuity issue is Guyana, where it was very simple to probably look up Wikipedia and see where she first met Picard and all of that. And they obviously didn't, because there's the Time Zero episode where she, as Whoopi Goldberg, meet Picard during Mark Twain's time in the 19th century. And that's just totally forgotten in this. And they recast Guinan. And I didn't think Whoopi Goldberg looked too bad. I thought she could almost get away with playing a younger version of herself as well.
Yeah, I did some reading about this, and apparently the filmmakers or the makers said it is a different timeline, and you got to do your head around that one, because yes, it was brought up there in Time Zero. They do meet already, and of course, Guinan hasn't changed at all, which then of course prompts the question: well, why have you got a younger looking one? And they did actually say, or some fan actually come up with the speculation, because you don't really know much about their species, her species. There's nothing to say that she ages differently to everybody else, so that they sort of, it's not a linear age. So you start young and get old. You could start sort of old, using simple terms, get young, get old, get old, and all this sort of thing. So a few people did question that as to why she looked different. But, I guess you can put that one aside. But
that for me is fine, but it shouldn't be the fans coming up with theories why. It should be at the end of the actual series, they say, and this is why. That's like, I always say this, if you watched a Sherlock Holmes movie and at the end Sherlock Holmes said, and this is the guy that did it all, arrest him. And then he just didn't explain why he worked out who was the guy and how it was done. It wouldn't be a very satisfying movie. And that's what I don't like in drama these days. Often they do this mystery box thing, and at the end, everything wraps up, but they don't explain half the stuff that they put in the story. Now, I don't think any of this is going to be explained next season. It might lead into events next season. I don't know if Wesley will be back as the Watcher or the Traveller. The other issue I had with this is going off again, when we established Laris as the Watcher looking after Picard, she had this ability where all the humans around her, she could freeze, their eyes would blink white, and she could control them. So how come they needed to have any problem getting into NASA, any problem with the Borg or any of that? Because she was so powerful, she could have just froze them all in the spot.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for you in that one. But with that in mind, with that character, so we got Talyn, right? And it turns out she's a Romulan and she's a supervisor / watcher. What the deal is with that is anybody's guess, right? And she just happens to look like Laris. What are the chances of that? Picard's sort of like pseudo girlfriend, if you will. it's a tricky one. And being a Romulan, and being on Earth, even if she's a traveler, it doesn't fit. It's almost head scratching stuff. And you get and my thing was always being that why would you have watchers on Earth in the first place? Because then you start tempering and mucking around with the temporal accords and time traveling and all this sort of rubbish, and having people down here watching other people to see how they're going. And there must be a million things that you say, well, actually having Rene Picard going to Europa isn't the key thing. It's the dude who makes the widget that goes on the ship that allows it to take off. That's the dude you got to protect. And I thought, because when I heard the term watcher, I mean, I don't know about you, but the first thing I thought was, I was going to be this stuffy English dude, from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a watcher. And I go, all right, so that means that there are aliens inhabiting modern day Earth, around the place. You had the Vulcans, you got the traveling, the watching, and all this sort of business. I don't know. It's muddying the genetic sort of waters a little bit. It does
make it overly complicated when sometimes a complicated setup and then a simple story and a good explanation is what is needed. I did think there was a lot of things that were brought up and sort of trotted around, and then when again they were obviously making statements about ICE agents and refugees and the treatment of Mexicans, and then that sort of came and they looked at it and it disappeared again. And the stuff with NASA, the story seemed to be in a whole heap of blocks where they go, we've got this point, we've got this point, we've got this point, but none of them really flowed together for me. And I've got to say, the whole NASA party, that was harder to get into than maybe a presidential a thing. And I was just like, they're going to Europa, they're meant to be in isolation and they're having this huge party. A lot of it for me was just like, it happened because it was written. It didn't happen because it was realistic.
Yeah, it's a fair call. And you are right, Ange. You're right. Gary Seven they did reference Gary Seven. And of course, that's where the whole watcher supervisor thing comes from. I guess that's your get out of jail free card. But I still argue that, well, would you have a Romulan there? Anyway, whatever. So they go back in time, right? Okay. So, and we're kind of jumping our discussions around a little bit. So they go back in time. And you go, well, it's just like Star Trek 4, something's going to go wrong, right? And the very first thing that happens is Rios gets himself knocked out, ends up at a medical clinic, and the kid is mucking around with his communicator, right? So automatically 24th or 3rd century tech has ended up in this dude's hands. And, of course, that's echoing Star Trek 4. And I was actually sitting there thinking, you bunch of frigging idiots. I was like, how could you not tell that it's the butterfly effect. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anything. And anyone, of course, almost instantly that occurs. And you do wonder, where are the temporal agents coming back in time going, no, you can't do that. You freaking bunch of knobs. And, of course, I mean, I was keeping tabs on what was going on. And it's like they lose a bit of technology. It ends up, I think, with the FBI guy, and there's a little bit that goes somewhere else. And you go, all right, this has the tendency of really mucking everything up big time. And just the fact that he has the footage of Picard beaming in doesn't mean that nobody else is going to get that footage as well. So from the very beginning, they're already making a mess of everything. So, but I guess that's part of the entertainment factor, regardless if the continuity makes sense. So,
yeah. So there was a lot of stuff like that. There was a lot of things just we know from living on Earth doesn't happen. How does Picard's vineyard sit untouched since wartime, where it hasn't been cleaned, taken over, redeveloped into shadows? The grapes on the vines are still kind of there, like they've almost not 100 years or 150 years. It's sort of like maybe 10 years of growth when they go to it. They find bottles of wine in the deserted vineyard that have been there for 100 years. Now, I know just from being into collectible, if you get a bottle of wine pre-World War I from when it was, they're worth millions of dollars each. And they were just sitting around there, never been scavenged kind of thing.
Yeah, I can let that one slide, because he did say that it's been in the family keeping for hundreds of years. And I kind of got that. And I actually like the fact they made references to World War II, which is kind of groovy. And the writers did actually say that apparently you see the Shadow Picard in one of the Next Generation episodes. In this episode, there's bits added on or bits taken off, one of the two. And apparently in the fire that occurred in Generations, that's where those bits blew off or got burnt off. I thought that was actually kind of cool. I had no problem with it. The thing that I found funny, and you are right, when they're drinking a bottle of wine from 1915, that's going to taste like cat's piss. And the thing I laughed, there were two things that are just like, this is not really working. One, we've still got LPs in the 24th century. 500 years time, they'll still be making LPs. I thought, that is bullshit. No one's going to be using records in the future. That'd be like using wind-up gramophones for us. It's like, that's just not going to happen. And getting back to the Picard's younger side, I couldn't work out why in his past, everybody dressed like they're in the mid 20th century, like the 1930s and the 1950s. Everything, right? Well, it's almost like they're deliberately trying to say to us, oh, this is when he was younger, so therefore we have to push the tech and the look and the feel right back 500 years. And that to me made no sense whatsoever. So,
this is one I have to bring up that Chad mentioned to me. Picard's past, when we see him as a little boy, is still far, far in our future, and it's like a utopian future where he's going to become a Star Trek captain. How come they don't know how to deal with mental health? They lock his mother just in a room. We know from Star Trek they have medical facilities and they're very caring, and mental health is something that still happens in some Star Trek episodes. There is no reason to have skeleton keys and put her in a room by herself and all of that. The father was abusing her.
Yeah, I didn't interpret the fact that he was abusing her. I thought I interpreted it he was protecting her. That's how, because he didn't, as far as I know, didn't physically hit her or anything like that. Yeah. But clearly she had problems. But I do agree with you that you are right. If a person has mental health issues, and clearly that's meant to relate to today, right? Yeah. Everything is relating to what's happening today. The whole racial thing, the environmental thing, the climate change thing. It's a message. Right, so it's not set in the future; it's actually set today because it's a message for today. That's the reason why I think when you're looking at Picard's past, that is deliberately designed to make it look like our past, right? Like 50, 60 years ago. And they're saying, well, okay, there are people who have mental health issues, even though in the future you think that'd be far more treatable than it is today. With all that, I mean, it took a long time, most of the season, to get through what the hell was going on. I knew straight up somewhere along the line, I thought, she's going to knock herself off. I kind of got that. And I was glad that she didn't die at the hand of an alien attack or anything. She actually took her own life. And I was surprised they actually showed her hanging. I really did. I thought, okay, there's probably going to, some people are going to be a tad upset with that. And I thought, rather than just seeing the feet, you actually see most of the body. And I thought, oh, okay, fair enough. But I am at least glad that occurred and it wasn't like something else that was like extraterrestrial related. But it's all part of this whole shutting down his own mind for the past, which of course people have this issue today. So I kind of got that. So
yeah. So I got the story and the motivation and what they were trying to do. I just thought it was clumsily told within the Star Trek framework.
Yeah, I get, and I totally agree with you. You're right. In the future, you think that's one thing that they will find. I mean, whether it be we'll take a drug, my head's perfectly okay now. Yeah. I get you. Because they could have easily have dealt with this sort of issue in any of the other previous Star Trek iterations. And just because this is set, maybe 60 or 80 years before Next Generation, I mean, it's still the future for us. So, I totally agree with you on that one. What was I say? Break out the leeches and the head screws, boys. It's time to get up 1860s. Yeah, exactly right. And it did take a while to get where it wanted to go, and it probably could have been condensed a lot way down. But anyway, based on what you said earlier, I didn't interpret the fact that the father was abusive to her, but he realized she had an issue and was suicidal. And of course, he was trying to protect the kid. That's how I sort of interpret it. So,
sorry, I didn't mean that he was abusive and it was a bad relationship. I meant just locking her away was an abusive thing to do rather than seeking medical help from Starfleet Medical or something like that.
Yeah, no, fair call. Totally agree with it. And they clearly had the money for it. But anyway, so the vineyard sort of goes the whole way through. And I found it funny, when the ship first crashed outside the vineyard, right? I thought, well, okay, even by today's standards, you think radar and whatever would see it all. And nearly every sequence you see of the vineyard is at nighttime, except for the very last scene when the sun's coming up. I thought, doesn't anybody even sort of know what's going on? Anybody check out the noise and all this sort of thing? It's like, don't they even have security guards driving around? Sure, you get the police guy who turns up later on, but it was a little bit too convenient. But you are right, yes. Drinking wine that is 100 years old is not going to go down well. What can I? Actually, you need to spit it out and go, oh, Picard, this is shit.
Yeah, that would have been more realistic, actually, because it would have turned to vinegar cat's piss in that time. Now,
was worth noting that in a Next Generation episode, Picard's father did actually appear, but he was a lot older too.
Yes.
There you go. Picard's backstory was all over the place and difficult to follow. Yeah, I think that was intentional. because it's his memory, and his memory's all a bit sort of screwed up, and he's remembering this and remembering that, and it's just not all clear cut, and he's obviously repressed it all, which I get that, and that's fair enough. And I thought it was interesting because you do actually get to see where he has his affinity to paint, because he was painting with his mother in that glass house thing. I thought, okay, that's a nice little link back, because the Next Generation is in painting, so it's pretty cool. I had no problem with that.
So the other issue I had was when you have the emergency holograms, and of course they used forgotten the name, the Vulcan, the Romulan,
Elenor.
Yeah, really, he would have chosen to sword fight, and really he would be flinching and dodging because you're a hologram and you don't need to, kind of thing. So I did think, yes, it looks exciting to do, but it's not exactly how an emergency hologram would work. I wouldn't have thought.
You're right. Yeah, the whole combat hologram thing is interesting, isn't it? And they take your safety off and away you go. Now, regarding him, right now, they actually mentioned this in the episode. I picked up on this because I'm a bit of a nerd. Excuse me. They actually say he's the first full Romulan to join Starfleet. Now, he joined pretty damn fast. I don't think he's a cadet in this or what, but he seemed to sign up pretty damn quickly after the last season. But depending on what canon you follow, Sarik was actually the other Romulan who joined, but she was half Romulan, half Vulcan. But of course, in canon, they've sort of changed that to saying she's only Vulcan. But for a period of time, she was actually half of one, half of the other. So just sort of chucked it in there. So
wasn't Kim Cattrall's character also?
No, she was Vulcan. Oh, I think she was a Vulcan. I think that was Valerius. Yeah.
It depends what cut of the movie you watch, I thought.
Yeah, I think it's Valerius. And yeah, exactly right. Then I've just got to fix a picture here. Just give me a second, because I did find something rather funny that I've got to show you. So they're looking at the thing with the Stargazer. They're going, because that was Picard's original ship. It's not the original. It's obviously a renamed one. And of course, even I picked up on this. It's like, where's the bloody A, B, C, D? And the producers have said, it's because the Stargazer wasn't as famous as the Enterprise. They didn't bother giving it the A, B, C, D, or E thing. So clearly, if your ship gets the extra letters at the end, you're a bit of a cool cat. But if you don't, you're just a bit of a shit kicker. Don't know if you noticed that. Yeah, half Vulcan, half Romulan. Is that Valerius, is it? If that's the case, then yeah, fair enough. So that's the reason why they said for Elenor he was the first full Romulan. I thought I agree. With Australian accent, by the way. So
do you know who I'm surprised they haven't exploited yet? Cybok. That's a character we need to see more of.
Actually, it's very funny you should mention that, because I was actually going to bring up we're sort of jumping around and I can't help myself here, right?
Sorry.
So in the alternative universe, there's a comment from a couple of guys. I'm going to get to that sec, right? So Q tells Picard that he's a bit of an asshole. He's been killing dudes left, right, and center, right? Sarik, Sarik rather, Gul Dukat, which I thought was interesting, a Borg, and even a Ferengi. Who wants to kill a Ferengi? Jesus Christ. But the funny gag is that he says that Sarik killed he killed him. He was killed in front of his wife and son. And I thought, which son? Was it Spock or Cybok? So it's good that you and I are both picking up the same Star Trek 5 reference there, because Cybok was actually a son of Sarik. So yeah, well done.
Yeah.
Two great nerds think alike, don't they?
There you go. So, well, they avoided that. A lot of continuity there. I did like the skulls. I thought that was quite cool to see all of those.
Yeah, it was actually, and it was like, because you don't normally get. I mean, I don't have a close-up picture, but when you get to see all the different variations, I thought that was kind of groovy, and and the fact that they make references to Gul Dukat, which I think was kind of cool. And that's where he says he gets his nifty synthetic body. So Picard's still got the synthetic body, he's still the android kind of dude, and we've lost Aron again, so I'll just fill myself out to the main screen. So he's coming and going. Oh, you're back again, son. You're beaming in and out. You're right, Ange. The Excelsior doesn't have the A, B, or C either. So clearly they're just a bunch of shit kickers. Sorry, I've just stop for a sec. Yeah, clearly the Excelsior hasn't sort of made its name in the scheme of things. So it's a good point there, old son. So unbelievable. Rico said, You're right. Why wasn't Seven allowed to join the Federation? It was established that each was Starfleet. He's wearing a Starfleet uniform. And I think it's mentioned in here that Janeway kind of gave up on Seven. So I don't know. Do you have a comment on that at all?
No, I think it's almost like, I guess the baton has been passed to new writers, and you've just got to accept the people who are writing for Star Trek at the moment aren't, super fans. So they're writing for characters that they haven't written for years and years and years. So sometimes the essence of the character is there, but the character is a lot different from the ones we know from 20 years ago. And it's changed. I prefer the ones from 20 years ago. I'm sure there are people that love the new Star Trek better as well, though.
Yeah. Yes. One thing I did pick up, I'm zigzagging everywhere because I'm going through all these pictures and I go, oh, that's interesting. When you do go to Picard's chateau in the Confederation timeline, he walks in and he sees all these suits of armor and all these weapons everywhere, right? And the first thing I thought of is obviously someone had to go do a quick trip down to the Paramount archives to pick up all of the props because there's all these different types and set them up and make them look good. So I just thought I'd chuck that in because I'm a bit of a nerd.
They get down to the Paramount archives, they go, oh, holy crap, we've sold them all in auction at Prop Store. Better go to Danebury Mint to get some replicas.
Get the 3D printer. Okay, the land is that Janeway went to bat for 7 until 7 herself gave up. Oh, okay, yeah, sorry. I only saw the episode once and I did forget it. So, fair enough. So it was actually 7 herself who decided to bail out. Oh, that's because there was the anti-Borg sort of sentiment she was getting. It's funny enough, we were discussing earlier, and then Rico even brought it up about the racism, xenophobe sort of thing, and clearly 7 of 9 wasn't treated as being one of us, so to speak, being ex-Borg, which was, that's exactly what you're referring to, which is kind of groovy. With that in mind, I don't know if you picked up on this, but at the start of the show, when you got a shitload of ships, right, and a lot of these came from Star Trek Online, in case you didn't know, but they got all this Borg technology in them. I was like, mate, what could possibly go wrong if you're going to do that? And of course it does go wrong. What do you reckon?
Well, I thought that was because the Borg coordinated the shields with the ships. So when they connected up with the Borg space genitals, which it looked like to me, they started all glowing green like they had Borg connections with them.
No. What I'm saying is that prior to this sequence taking place, they've intentionally put Borg technology into all the starships, right? And it's just like, mate, that is shifty stuff. Yes, like, what could possibly go wrong? And of course, when the Borg turn up, all these things activate. And it's like saying, oh, I've got my enemy's product. I'm going to stick it in my ship thinking, oh, it's going to be awesome. And of course, that's not the case at all.
You know what?
With regards to that, so the Borg turn up, right? So as often the case with a lot of these shows, if you're desperate to make your ratings go higher, you've got to bring back your favorites, right? And of course, Q was one of them. And the next one is the Borg. Everybody loves the Borg. You can never get enough of them. The Daleks of the Star Trek universe, right? And of course, the Borg Queen returns. And the question I got to ask is that before we go back in time, right? If Jurati is standing on the bridge up there, who's this? Which Queen is this one? So is it the Queen that we see later on, or is it Jurati in two different guises? Oh, I don't know. Just sort of putting it out there.
It's Jurati in two different parts of her timeline, because she is there in that timeline and then they get thrown back and she doesn't get returned when the others do, because she's gone off to become the Borg Queen.
Yeah, exactly right. And there's actually a good comment from Rico I'm going to put up in a sec once I find the respective picture. You are right. So when it's like, this is Jurati, beams aboard, why did she just show us her face to start with, right? And would have saved everybody a whole lot of angst, right? So once we see her like this, it's got the big reveal. If she had just appeared like this in the first place, they would have gone, oh my God, it's Jurati is the Borg Queen. Oh, cool. Tell us your story. What's the deal?
No.
So
I can tell you why she couldn't have. Because if they have done that, Picard wouldn't have set the ship to self-destruct and she wouldn't have been thrown back and become the Borg Queen.
That's a very good point. So from a narrative perspective, she's turned up thinking, I'm Jurati, but I'm just going to let myself be a little bit mysterious for a little while longer. I'm just going to have my tentacles invade the entire ship, steal the shit from the other ships, and not going to tell anybody who I am. I mean, I'll tell you what, it's good for tension, and it's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? But realistically, you go, yeah, that's not how you do it. We come in peace, shoot to kill scenario. Yes. And of course, she says at the end that the Borg want to join the Federation. And I thought, yeah, I don't think that's going to pass the pub test, kids. What do you
I was thinking, there is no way. What you were saying earlier, if the Federation ships all have Borg technology on them already, haven't they watched Battlestar Galactica? Don't they know that the Cylons, or the Borg in this case, will just turn all the ships off?
Yeah, exactly right. And of course, if there was this whole push against having 7 of 9 join the Federation because she was Borgish, right? They're like, you reckon they're going to say, yep, no worries, 7, you're not welcome, but hey, we'll bring the entire collective in because they're looking after the gateway of this particular spatial Dubalaka. Yeah, that's just a tag.
These are a subset of Borg, though. They're not the same Borg collective, are they, as the mean Borg collective that we've seen before, or are they?
Oh, I don't. They could be a subset, but I thought they all had the same mindset. I mean, the fact that like Girardi has a bit of Girardi in her head. I mean, this is where you start heading down the whole descent thing. If you remember from Next Generation with Hugh and all those guys, and there's a bit of a splinter group and whatever. But by default, the Borg are a bunch of nasty pasties. So I don't know. It's a tough one. I mean, it worked for the show. It was like, oh my god, awesome! How cool is this? Because once they get back to the future, Girardi's not on the ship, and Rios is buggered off because he stayed home. That's a whole nother discussion. And then, as it turns out, Girardi's in the Borg Queens thing. So it's great for viewing entertainment, but it makes no sense if she had just turned up, said, here I am, I need your help to save the universe. And they would have said, no worries, all good. But now they come in with guns blazing and, oh, my God.
Yeah. Like Chad's right there. Wouldn't Starfleet have been a little suspicious when Picard says, okay, hand everything over to the Borg, give them control?
Yeah, exactly right. Okay, yeah, I get it. So, yes, indeed. But still, I mean, admittedly, had she turned up and they had to go on, hey, Girardi looks like the Borg Queen, and she's standing right next to them, that could have made for a very, very funny moment. But
yeah.
Dear. Speaking of Borgs, so we saw 7 and 9 in the alternative timeline, didn't have the Borg implants, right? Somewhere along the way, I've forgotten how she gets them back, and they're exactly in the same spot. I go, oh, how lucky is that? Those prosthetics are already pre-made. Can't knock that one, can you?
Yeah, that's for cheapness. The other thing that was done for cheapness, and we brought this up before with Laris being the same actress, but boy, the Noonian songs must be inbred if every single version of them is played by Brett Spiner. I mean, it happens a lot in time travel, but really, you kind of do want some diversity, don't you, with the actors? It is stretching credibility just a bit that every single generation looks exactly like him.
Well, you know what? I actually think it's quite good, because if you had a completely unknown dude turn up and he says, oh, I'm Adam Sung, your audience is already disconnected. And the first thing they'll be saying, how come he doesn't look like Data, right? And I didn't mind it. From simple familiarity perspective, it worked for me. And of course, the funny thing is that he doesn't start off being a bit of a bad guy, even though he's trying to genetically create people, and he does it with Corey. But he's the only one who really now knows that there are aliens that exist in the universe. And I found that quite interesting because he dealt with Girardi, Borg Queen, head on. And of course, he obviously has a bit of a power thing going on, because he realized that if Girardi doesn't get to go, not Girardi, Renee doesn't get to go to Europa, he himself heads down the path of his future selves, being a part of the Confederation. So I didn't mind that, actually. I like the fancy house he lived in too, by the way. And of course, as some people said, hang on, when Renee wiped out all of his data, surely he's got like backups and hard drives and stuff all over the place, even off-site ones he could have referred to. So, yeah.
If Picard's entire personality can be backed up on a USB stick that we saw the last series, surely he's got some hard drives somewhere that aren't, hooked in, that they could have saved stuff on. So I did think, that was a bit pushing the boundaries. How's this? Wait. He's got the Noonian Sung stuff because it's on paper in a folder. Where are all the other folders of his research that they just erased the
bit of old-fashioned hard copy, eh? Yeah, absolutely love it. Yeah, I reckon that was kind of groovy. And yes, you are right. But it was made for a nice moment, as we mentioned earlier. But yes, the idea of using Brent Spiner as Adam Sung, I kind of liked it. Just like how Corey looks exactly like Soji. I had no problem with that. I mean, it wouldn't happen in real life, but it kind of works for me. And although you could work with that argument, does that mean all of your ancestors look exactly like you? So if you go back 500 years, Benjamin Challenger is identical to you. Love it. You're right, Gavin. He uses the cloud in 2024. That's pretty much what would happen too. So, Rico said, what sort of upgrades do you need to have a human fix a stomach wound and eye implants? Yeah, exactly right. I mean, when Picard gets bowled over by, he's driving a Tesla, by the way, good old Mr. Sung, which I thought was kind of cool. No, we didn't hear it coming. I thought, mate, he's a machine now. He's more machine now than man. So how hard could it possibly be? Whatever. Gets the bloody nose too.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. Where are we? Now, one thing I did want to bring up very, very quickly, if I could find my bloody picture, is some of the supporting cast. I have to say that, first off, when good old Rios ends up in the medical center, right, and Teresa turns up and is like, yeah, as a no-brainer, he's going to hook up with her, right? And it's like, hasn't gone the old carry-on matron scenario. No, he's got the really attractive Hispanic lady there. So that was a no-brainer. He was going to fall for her. What do you reckon? Even though Was it Raffi? His old flame is sort of floating around at the same time. So what do you reckon of that?
Yeah, well, she's giving eyes to Seven of Nine. It was funny because when this happened, I was like, they're either going to end up together or she's not going to appear in the series at all again. Like, just sort of because they kept chopping and changing storyline and characters. So it was something that it wasn't a surprise when it happened, was it?
I mean, it is a bit of a gag where throughout the entire Star Trek history, it's always been like, don't break the Prime Directive, right? Don't do that, don't do this. And what does Rios do? He goes, yep, jump on my ship, just transport over to my ship and have a muck around, press some buttons and all the rest of it. It's like, dude, where you going with this, son? So at the very least, what he should have done at the end is transport both of them, Teresa and the kid Ricardo, I think it was, to his time, just like Gillian, what happened with her in Star Trek 4. So if he stays behind, they then know that there's a future, and of course he knows exactly what's going to happen with the future. And some people have been trying to ascertain as to whether he was preparing, like Rios, preparing himself to do whatever he needed to do to ensure that when World War III did happen, and it does happen, and the way the world is today, we're heading down that path anyway, that they're protected. But I thought, God, that's just stretching it a bit, eh? So, but whatever.
Yeah, well, yeah. I thought what had been a very cool thing at the end when Q is talking about them going back and Rios says he's going to stay, and they go, you can't stay. Q should have said he's got to stay. He's his great grandfather.
Yeah. And the fact that the kid ends up using the technology that Renee finds to sort of like save the universe, and it's just wanked it right up. What are you saying, fan wank? Yeah. Obviously, there's a lot of characters doing a lot of things, and a lot of things that occurred from the first season that did not carry over the second season. And you go, okay, fair enough. What happened to the Romulan guys, the Cack Bash or whatever. But one of the things that really irked me about this, you got all these characters. They're all in the new series, and they've all changed their mindset a little bit. Now, I get that, but one of the ones I thought was the weakest of the lot was good old Raffi. I thought she was terrible. All she did was bitch and moan and complain, and always like looked at a negative side of everything. Had this real like thing about Elenor, and I just found it annoying. I actually found that I thought she was actually one of the weakest characters of the series, which is a bit unfortunate. Actually,
some of the stuff she said didn't make sense at all. When Elenor dies and she blames Picard, and she's like, "I'm having a real problem with the effing command structure in this." It's obviously not his fault, and he's actually trying to do everything he can to save all of humanity from the Borg, and she's having a hissy fit over this. I just thought it was very unrealistic.
Yeah, and I agree with Gavin. Yeah, always look at the bright side of life. I mean, she's got this connection. I was trying to find, because I thought, I don't remember the first season that well. Where was the link between her and Elenor? And I mean, she got rejected by her own son. We know that from the first season. But she's now sort of adopted this dude as being the surrogate son, if you will. And it just seems to happen overnight. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, sorry. You've got to remember he's gone through Starfleet, so it's 2 or 3 years after the first series. So that whole connection happened off screen, which I think is lazy because it makes people go, well, we didn't see that. They're just saying that happened. And yes, she did lose her own son, so he was obviously the one that was used to fill his place. But when you don't show that and it's just his graduation, it sort of cheats the audience of that build-up.
Yeah, that was the problem I had, because I thought, have I missed something? And I actually had to go back today and have a look and go, hang on, were these guys connected in the first season? And I couldn't find any reference to whatsoever. And she's like really hardcore about good old Elenor. And you're right, when he dies, she just goes completely loses the load and go, all right, what am I missing here? Why is this connection here? And that I agree with you. It just didn't seem to be established. So,
And it did seem very musical chairs with, Raffi and Thingo are sort of together in the first one, and it moves around where Seven is together with the captain, and then Seven is together with Raffi. And you're just like, it's almost something I wish they just took out, and you didn't have to deal with some of the relationships, because they don't write them very well.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. While I'm sort of jumping around the place, there is obviously a lot of fan service in this particular show, and some of it really works for you as well. I just found this picture just now. Thought I'd chuck this in. I like the idea where 10 Forward came from. It was Forward Avenue in number 10. That kind of worked for me. I thought it was kind of groovy, a nice little gag. So there you go.
Yeah, I thought 10 Forward was always because it was the most forward deck, number 10. on the Enterprise as well. That's where everyone came to watch the stars go by. So
yeah, I think that was intentional. That was intentional. It was meant to be like that, but now they've retconned it and said, "Oh no, it's actually originally inspired by this particular street, which is particularly green."
I did think it was pretty nasty of Guinan saying, "I don't like Earth anywhere. Everyone, it's all slums and it's all hobos." Where she's actually living in the worst area of New York, and all she had to do was move a couple of suburbs, and everything would have been fine.
Yeah, and once again, I think that's intentionally saying, because when they show our heroes walking through the streets, and it's just like, oh, it looks really, really terrible. It's an indictment of the current modern day environment. So I get that. There's a comment from Rico. I'm going to get to that in a sec. One thing I did want to sort of mention, we did touch on this earlier, but I just wanted to highlight it. Some people have actually said that obviously there's this thing with Picard and the romantic link with Laris. Now that Zaban is gone, we don't know what happened to him. He's disappeared. But a lot of people have said, no, didn't Picard always have a thing for Beverly Crusher? Now, there could be a reason why they're not connected, like maybe she's moved on or whatever. But he gives the impression that he's never loved anybody ever, right?
Yeah.
He's always had the walls up and all the rest of it. But no, he does actually have a history with Beverly. So, and that was covered off a fair bit in Next Generation. So, I'm not entirely sure where they're going with that.
And he had, from Tapestry, he had flings in Starfleet as well. I don't know if it was love, but it was definitely he definitely led a normal life, and he wasn't withdrawn in Starfleet and isolating himself at all, was he?
Yeah, exactly right. And it was part of his career. So it's a little bit. I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to say he's always been on his own, and you're right. His family was the crew and the ship and all the rest of it. Now he's got the vineyard. He needs something else, and it's just what's the something else that he's put the walls on. But yeah, there is a history there. So now.
Every time he went to Risa, the walls came down.
And just another one. I don't know if you picked up on this. I thought this was actually interesting. They made a point of showing the Earth at the start, right? And I think it was deliberately done because they're going to show the other version from the Confederation where they got this shield all around it. I don't know if you noticed that at all. I thought that was actually kind of groovy. So,
well, the thing was, the shield was foreshadowing that it was Noonian Song who did it all, because when you saw him in the garden, he had those things to shield his daughter from the rays. So that kind of gave it away that he was the one that was responsible for the shield on the future Earth, I thought, but it never really explicitly stated that. But that was really weird as well, because it was obviously not technology we have in a year or two's time, and yet he had it, and he had this portable shield that blocks out UV and all the nasty stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. Very, very cool. I'm not even going to read this out, but I'll put it on the screen. You can look at it yourself. I thought he was being actually quite serious, but then he's getting, as soon as you mentioned Star Wars and 8 balls and whatever, it's like, I've got no idea what he's. But I put that in for Rico's sake because he wanted to join the show tonight, and I just said no. So there you go. Now, we're going to finish in a couple of seconds because we can just ramble on for hours otherwise. There was a couple of things that I did pick up on. So for those who haven't noticed, 2 years from now, April the 15th, 2024, right? That's when the Europa mission launches. We can celebrate that as Confederation Day or Convergence Day, because clearly we're not going to go to Europa and find this life form. So the whole world, the universe, our future is completely juicy-fruited because there's no ship launching to Europa that day. So we'll have to celebrate that. We'll call it Confederation Day. What do you reckon, dude?
Yeah. Oh, maybe they find the spores that let that spore drive work on the Voyager from Discovery or something like that.
But in real time, in our lifetime, in 2024, we are not launching anything anywhere. So those life forms on your Io are staying there, and that means our future is completely screwed.
We're not even getting back to the moon.
Yeah, well, exactly right. I mean, getting to the ISS is hard enough as it is. It was the Zat Vash. Someone pointed out that the bad guys from season 1, they're just like, what happened to their storyline? They just disappeared off the face of the Earth. And even in the Confederation, synthetic dudes are clearly allowed because they've got like these androids running around everywhere doing their thing. So I thought, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, kind of cool. Unbelievable. So in the end, we're going to summarize our thoughts. What did you think of season 2 of Pilchard?
When there's a good setup and then the story in my head is better than the writers that come up with, I think it's a waste. So I thought it was a bit of a misfire for me.
Okay. I like this one from Gavin. You're right. The shields would stop UV rays and that would kill the plant life. Yeah, it's a good point. You have to put them in selective spots. But yeah, well done.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to cover off. I don't think so. You're right. As I said earlier, entertainment, story, and continuity. Clearly, the story had its ups and downs. The continuity had its ups and downs. There's a lot of head scratching going on. A lot of fans were really like saying we enjoyed it, but There's all these issues. Excuse me. From my perspective, I kind of switched my brain off and just enjoyed it for what it was. I actually found it entertaining, even though the problem with the Star Trek series is you're meant to be in the future, dealing with the future. As soon as you come back to Earth, it's the whole Star Trek feeling is gone, right? You need to have spaceships and aliens and whatever. The moment you set it here, you just lose that. It's just a contemporary story. So that sort of took a lot out of it.
Yeah.
But I actually found it to be quite entertaining.
The first episode of Strange New Worlds?
Hang on. You're cutting me off. Hang on. Give me a second. So the key thing is that where was I going? Oh, yeah. So I found it entertaining and I actually did enjoy it, but I am aware that there's actually a lot of faults and problems with it. And to finish off what you were going to say, the biggest issue I think this season will have, even though it finished only 5 days ago, I think people are going to forget about it already and move on to Strange New Worlds. And I think that has the potential to be more successful than anything. So even though Picard should be the ants pants because it's bringing in all this fan service and bringing in a lot of the characters from the past, and of course, season 3 will do the same. It's almost like
fading in and out here by the looks of things.
Sorry, what?
Yeah. So
no, I didn't hear. Say again. What'd you say?
I just thought the new series for me is more of a Star Trek series than Picard was. Picard should have been a character study about Picard, and I think they just tried to overstuff it. So for me, it was pretty disappointing. Out of 5, maybe a 1.5 for me. Really, really strong start and a really letdown at the end.
Wow, 1.5. Geez, that's a bit harsh. Even I would probably go for 3.5 to 4. I'm not sure. Maybe 4 because I was entertained, even though I could pretty much predict everything that was going to happen. So there you go. All right, so we're going to buzz off. We may end up doing, once Strange New Worlds has finished, a review of that as well, because clearly that's what everybody's looking at the moment. And Picard for season 2, for all the build up and all the hype, Q coming back and the Borg coming back. I think everybody's just sort of pushed it aside and said, all right, even after a few days after the 10th episode aired, and decided to move on to something else. So there you go. Any final words before we sign off for tonight, Mr. Aron?
No, it was better than the last 3 or 4 years of Doctor Who.
They had to bring a Doctor Who reference in there somewhere, didn't you? Okay, there you go. Very, very cool. Party hard, rock on. We'll leave you to it. And if you now that you're bringing up Doctor Who, we'll be back in a couple of weeks to talk about good old Star Wars Kenobi. We'll be doing that week by week episodic reviews of that. So it should be very, very cool. All right, we'll leave you to a party hard, and we'll see you next time. Okay, bye, guys.
Live long and prosper. Good night.